The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. Other people are busy discussing us. The least opportunity they get, we are their topic. Seeing how best they will come back stronger into the continent. We are the only ones that still do not know that people are busy preparing to come back stronger than they came. These people are having sleepless nights concerning African growth and the new wave that we are seeing in Africa. They've seen that the Sahel has really opened our eyes, and now there are other people. Their main problem is just China. According to them, they don't know what Russia and Iran and other people have, but China has a lot on the table. The United States of America survives on Africa, and not only the United States of America, even the West. We are the reason to which they are who they are. They are the reason to which we are surviving. They give us aids, they give us everything that we need. But in natural sense, we know that whatever that they give us, the peanuts, is for the mineral resources. According to the Senate, in US Congress, China has a lot on the table to offer to Africans. And they have to see how best they also come in. These people are not just having a bit of peace, because they know their survival depends on Africa. Africa is the strength of their economy.
Thank you. Mr. Baserbi, as we've been discussing, I believe the Chinese Communist Party presents the most significant long-term strategic threat to the United States. I also believe that China is a global threat that has to be confronted globally, including in Africa. We have a vast range of interests in Africa and a complicated security architecture. Our interests there are counterterrorism, trade in critical mineral supply lines, global biosecurity, preventing illegal immigration that threatens allies in other parts of the world, blocking illicit finance of hostile actors, and even, importantly, space development. And across Africa, again and again, the Chinese have exploited local political, economic, and sometimes even cultural conditions to undermine American national security interests. Sometimes they do it by securing bilateral and multilateral agreements that block American goals. Other times they do it by creating instability, but they are actively doing it. Talk a little bit about the specific tactics that China is using in East Africa and the Horn, and what are the specific conditions they are exploiting?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. China, first of all, has a long-standing strategy for the continent. That's been a topic of this conversation, is the U.S. doesn't have anything comparable. And they are highly disciplined about implementing it. So that's sort of the foundation of what they're doing. As far as specific tactics, they like to engage at a very senior level, the highest possible senior level. They do that in a variety of ways. Some of it is as open as bribery, but a lot of it is helping leaders, for instance, with key infrastructure projects that helps them politically in the domestic space, or just expressing solidarity. That rhetoric is important. But even the diplomatic exchanges, they engage, as I said, at a very high level, but they do it constantly as well. I referenced in my opening remarks over 100 visits from senior Chinese officials to this area. So they engage at a much higher tempo and at a much more senior level than U.S. Diplomats do. So those are some of the specific tactics that they use, but they're not unique to East Africa. They use them across the continent to great effect. And then easy money loans, very important to their strategy, investment, trade agreements. We're seeing more and more free trade agreements where these so-called green lanes, where they're preferential access to the Chinese market for agricultural goods. So it's genuinely a wide array of tactics that are grounded in a long-term strategy.
And how has Chinese involvement impacted the ongoing conflicts in the region?
Yeah, so I think usually China actually prefers stability because that facilitates what they're trying to do in other areas. They generally try to stay out of these types of things. We have seen some sort of, I would argue, weak diplomatic efforts from the Chinese. They do have a special envoy for the region who occasionally goes and talks to the various leaders, but I don't think anything substantive comes of it. And they do contribute to peacekeeping operations, but that's much more, I would argue, about them building both diplomatic heft, but also capabilities for and experience for the troops in these types of austere environments where they're often put. So I think they are not nearly as helpful as they could be. I think where they actively are negative are the Chinese weapons that flow through the area. Back in the original Sudan civil war, they armed the Omar al-Bashir regime, which was genociding Darfuris at the time. They armed both Ethiopia and Eritrea during their border war in the late 1990s. And Chinese weapons continue to flood the area. We're seeing Chinese bombs and other things, probably re-exported from UAE, show up in Sudan.
So many of the agreements China has been locking in are explicitly military agreements. Since 2017, China has operated a military base in Djibouti. The CCP Beijing is actively working to deepen ties across the region to secure greater access to the Red Sea and key maritime routes. Describe the nature of China's specifically military cooperation in the Horn.
So you referenced the flagship, which is the Djibouti base, but we have seen a very real uptick in military trainings. So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago the Chinese inaugurated an annual meeting for African defense chiefs. They convene in Beijing. And that has been ongoing, I believe, for 3 years, if I remember correctly. I also referenced in my written testimony the fact that PLA Navy vessels participate in these anti-piracy task forces in the Gulf of Aden. They then will go all around the continent doing port calls, both on the Indian Ocean, but also the Atlantic Ocean side. That's clearly an effort to build blue water naval capabilities that they covet so they can project power into the South China Sea and probably for an eventual invasion of Taiwan. And again, the weapons, so weapons training, deployments, and I already referenced the peacekeeping operations. I would say those are the primary elements.
Thank you.
You know, we read and hear a lot about the Belt and Road Initiative and growing influence of China in Africa and expanding security assistance. What challenge do those activities pose to U.S. counterterrorism efforts? And in particular, what would you suggest the United States be doing to ensure that in light of that investment on the part of the Chinese that we're evolving our counterterrorism efforts to be as effective as possible?
Well, thank you. I think the Belt and Road investments, I mean, certainly some of the digital Belt and Road investments raise questions, make it difficult for us to engage in intelligence cooperation with some of these partners because of concerns about Chinese access. But some of the infrastructure investments, quite frankly, redound to our benefit too, right? We are driving on the same road that they built, and that can help us get some things done. So I just want to flag that China's not going to leave Africa, not ever. And so learning how to compete effectively will require recognition that African governments are not going to reject all Chinese investment and trade. It's their largest trading partner, et cetera. But on counterterrorism, I think that it's really about influence, trust, the kind of relationships with security establishments that enable meaningful cooperation in any security space. And China's working very hard on establishing those kinds of relationships. Again, I think that the U.S. potentially has an advantage if we can work more institutionally rather than personally because of churn and turnover.
To the chairman's point, yeah. Mr. Chairman, I yield as well.
I don't mean this disrespectfully, but your criticism about pulling troops out of that area, I think it's important for the record to note that when you have troops there, the question always is who are you going to train and who are you going to fight with? And when you have Somalia, Puntland, Somaliland, all of whom have disputed borders and incredibly entangled tribal issues there, who do you stand with? Now, obviously, we fight ISIS there and we fight Houthis there. If you can identify them, okay. But boy, the rest of this stuff, this is really a tough question. So I appreciate the criticism, but there's a lot more to this than just here are the good guys and here are the bad guys. Finding good guys is really, really difficult there. So, but anyway, thank you for your thoughts. With that, we'll turn to Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for your testimony today. I'm actually going to pick up where Senator Rosen left off with respect to Sudan. We're now in the third year of a brutal civil war in Sudan. When Secretary Rubio was here for his confirmation hearing, he testified that helping resolve that conflict would be a top priority of the administration. Clearly, that has not happened. In fact, the cuts to U.S. humanitarian assistance have made a desperate situation in Sudan even worse. Ambassador Gavin, you wrote a piece for the Council for Foreign Relations, I think back in February, entitled The Abandonment of Sudan. Obviously, we need to look for ways to put pressure on some of the outside parties. I have proposed actually stopping U.S. military assistance to the UAE so long as it continues to support the murderous RSF. And I think I heard you say, Mr. Messervy, that the RSF could not continue its military operations without that outside help from the UAE. But if I could start with you, Ambassador Gavin, what should we do, and should we be using more of our leverage to put pressure on some of the outside parties that are fueling this murderous conflict, including the UAE support for the RSF?
Yes, I absolutely think we should be using more of our leverage with the UAE and having, real conversations. I think Emirati officials are aware that the RSF is never going to govern all of Sudan. They have concerns about what the other side of the coin looks like. And so do we, frankly, or we should. And what we've called the SAF for a long time is a coalition of entities and actors, some of which are highly problematic in terms of U.S. interests. And I don't think that is likely to hold together in a scenario where there could be a military solution. But the reality is there is no military solution. What needs to happen is a set of talks that involve Sudanese actors, pressure on these external actors who continue to arm and fuel both antagonists, but most importantly, really a greater effort to elevate the civilian voices in Sudan who have never given up. They continue to be, in many parts of the country, the only source of medical care, of food, which is quite scarce. And they have been organizing to try to come up with some clear principles they would like all parties to agree to. That needs to be raised up and given validation and credibility from the U.S.
Thank you. Given the time, I'm going to turn briefly now to Ethiopia and Eritrea. I think we all know that Ethiopia stands at a pretty critical juncture as it grapples with the aftermath of the conflict in Tigray. And as we speak, we see, Eritrea, I think the leader there called up the troops, at least there are reports to that effect. I guess my question for each of you is, if you were in charge right now of U.S. policy, what practical steps would you take today to try to address the bubbling, really almost boiling situation with respect to Ethiopia and Eritrea? Why don't we start with you, Mr. Messervy?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a few key issues here. One is that the Eritreans are still inside of Ethiopian territory in western Tigray, in violation of the Pretoria Agreement, which is what ended the Tigray War, ostensibly. So there has to be a process for having them leave, but of course their presence is also tied into the internal divisions where the Amhara claim that area, the Tigrayans also claim it. It's a major flashpoint. So I think right now what the U.S. can do, and I believe what it did do along with other partner countries, was to unequivocally demonstrate to both sides that we are watching and that a conflict would be unacceptable. And then it should offer its good offices for either convening discussions or trying to mediate around some of these issues. But they are intensely difficult, and I'm not, frankly, terribly positive about the immediate prospects for resolving them.
Thank you. Pastor Gavin.
I would just quickly agree and add that, mobilizing more of the AU member states to insist on actual implementation of the Pretoria Agreement would be a helpful focal point. This is something everybody's already agreed to, but it has not been fully implemented. It's in this strange limbo. And so I think that getting that kind of regional engagement would be helpful.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
The day will take control over everything that has to do with us. Their downfall has come. That is the reason to which they are sponsoring everything possible to make sure the African is always backwards. They fill us with all manner of things that wouldn't give us the time to think about what is happening around us and to understand what other people are planning towards us, for us to also get prepared for them. When other people are always busy discussing us, we are busy interested in things that are not of importance to us. These people are doing everything possible. What is it that we, the Africans, are doing? We know the mandate is not in our power. They deal with our leaders. And the leaders, as we say, are the problem. But the leaders alone aren't the problem, because these leaders always use us to do the works that they need to do. We have to come to the realization that if the continent will move forward, it is we the youth, like General Assimi Goïta rightfully told us, that can help develop the continent. We are seeing that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the youth, are together. See what is happening in Kenya. Now what is happening in Togo. Tribalism, religion, and any form that is dividing them, they've done everything possible to put those things aside and unite as a people together to fight for their liberation. And that is what all of us have to understand. Because these people are using these things that we are fighting ourselves with, that they have created, as a weapon to always divide us, to always make us fight among ourselves. And we should be interested in things that will be educative, that can help us change and know what is actually happening around the world. Like these people are busy discussing us. This is the time we should also be busy thinking about how we'll stand up for ourselves. China, they always say China, China. China is not only the main problem, because they've seen that China is the one doing things that is bringing our attention on development. And they will target us, do everything possible in their power to make sure that they wash us away from China. It's not about washing us away from China, but washing our mentality away from development. So what we will be fighting for, and we are supposed to be fighting for, we will rather channel the energy toward things that are not necessary. Democratic elected can never change the narrative, because these ones are there to fulfill the duties of their masters. It is we that have to unite as a people, because one can never do it. We all have to come together and fight collectively. We are one people, and that is the message that must sink in our heads. And that is the spirit that must burn in us. We should channel our energy towards love, towards one another. We should start to love ourselves, and wherever we find ourselves, we should try as much as possible to respect ourselves. That way we can work together and fight for that better Africa we are looking for. It is you and I that can change the narrative. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world and in the United States of America.